Check this out. I am aware of what time it is, and I guarantee you we're still okay. You guys don't know this, but I'm a real deep thinker. I'm going to share with you some of my deep thoughts. I don't know if I want to call this a poem, and it might be over your heads. You might not know it, but I'm going to read it to you anyway, because that's just the kind of guy I am. This is a really deep thing here. Making your way in the world today takes everything you got. You probably haven't heard this. Okay. Taking a break from all your worries sure would help a lot. Wouldn't you like to get away? This guy's good, isn't he? Sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name, right? Sometimes you want to go where they're always glad you came. You want to be where you can see, I don't know why it says that there. I guess it was a song. Our troubles are all the same. You want to be where everybody knows your name. Most people in here have heard that song. Several years ago when I was at a church with Greg Strickland, he actually made me sing it at the beginning of a church service. Cheers was a fictional bar in the city of Boston where everybody supposedly knows your name. No matter what was going on, how good or bad things were going at work or at home and other relationships, you could always come to this one place and find peace and find acceptance, and you always had somebody to talk to. That was the premise of the show. I know that the award-winning writers and actors were a part of why this show was so successful. But I believe, or would even state that I know, that part of the success of this show was built right into the lyrics of the theme song of Cheers. Every person longs for a place to belong. Every person longs for relationship. And let me tell you why. God created us that way. God created us for community. In the book Core 52, you've heard me talk about this book a couple of times. In the second week of studies, the author writes this: young adults often leave their families, communities, and traditions in order to find themselves. This can make you lost, though. We'll never know our true selves in isolation. We know ourselves to the extent that we are known. I like that line. We know ourselves to the extent that we are known. All of us are the sum of our relationships. Though our characteristics are unique, our character is forged on the anvil of community. Why does this matter? Because we live in a world that champions individualisms and achievements and things that seldom bring satisfaction that they promise. In terms of the church, this matters because we mistakenly try connecting with God only as a person when we were designed to experience Him in community. Our radical individualism is a denial of our identity in God. God created us in community for community. Without the circles God has placed us in, we have a shrunken view and a self-absorbed view of our purpose and place. You know what's funny is we live in a world that is very self-absorbed, don't we? We live in a world where in the last 20 years we've created something called the selfie. Are you so lonely that you don't got a friend you can hand the camera to take the picture? We live in a world where we have all this technology that promises us more and more relationships, deeper relationships, and instead we sit next to each other on the couch and we text one another. If you don't believe me, just go to a room where there's a bunch of teenagers. In a world where we're supposed to be more connected than ever before, people are lonelier and lonelier than ever. God created us to be together. What's the first thing that God said when man could hear him? It is not good for man to be what? Alone. And then he created women. You guys are laughing. I didn't say anything. But he said, it's not good for man to be alone. And then he created woman. What? So that they could have a relationship, right? And then we're created not to be just in relationship with man and woman, but with family, with friends, with lots of other people. Look what happened to us during the pandemic. When you got in these cities, these bigger cities where there was like millions and millions of people, and they kind of locked things down a little bit. Loneliness and depression, what happened? It rose. Because even though people were doing it for their safety, and I'm not criticizing that. Don't take this as a particular view. I'm just saying that in effort to make themselves healthy, their mental health was hindered. Look how many kids went into more depression when they couldn't go to school. We're created to be together. We're created to be in community. People were totally surrounded by other folks and were lonely because they were created for fellowship. In the dictionary, in the English dictionary, it says fellowship is a friendly association, especially with people who share one's interest. A group of people meeting to pursue a shared interest or aim. If we have the same interest, or if we have the same problems, or if we have the same struggles, we can align with one another. Why? Because I can look at Keith and I go, you know how I feel. Or you might know how I feel. Or you can relate to me. We have a common ground that we can find together. And sometimes that creates fellowship. That's why some of these support groups that I talk about a lot, that's why they're successful. Because they come into a room with people that are seeing the same things, or struggling with the same things, or walking in the same direction. I know because when I was going to Weight Watchers, I actually lost weight. Did I forget how when I quit? No. I got to the foolish idea that I've got this figured out, I can do it by myself. How many people in the church do that? I can worship God on my own. I don't need church. I don't need fellowship. I don't need encouragement from all these people. Why do we start 5 minutes late every week? Because the preacher's a dork. No. We do that because Sunday school ends at a certain time and then everybody comes in, and then what do you want to do? You want to be together. How's your life going? How's your job going? What's going on? I like that. I love that. It's beautiful. Me and Keith don't have all things in common. When we get in here and start talking about songs, we might be, oh boy, and you can lose track of time real fast. Because we got that common bond that brings us together. As Christians, we should have that common bond that brings us together and makes us want to be together, that common bond. When I think of that song we mentioned earlier, I want to be in a place where that song can be sung about our church. I'm terrible with names sometimes. You'll see me walking around with names in my phone. And I keep putting them in there. And I'll tell you, give me a little while because I'm going to forget your name. But I'm going to put it here in my phone. You know why? Because I want to know. Because that shows you that it's important to me. It might take me a while. Some of you guys that have been here for a while, David, I probably asked David 4 or 5 times. I asked Sam a couple times till I started calling him Uncle Sam. You know, and sometimes I still forget. But you'll see me walking around with them in my phone because I want to show you you're important. And I want to know who you are. I think the biggest need that young people have is to be known and to be seen. You ever feel invisible? You ever feel broken and frustrated? And then somebody comes to you and says, hey, I remember when you said this. I remember when you said that. And they go, they remember me. I was Kentucky Fried Chicken, imagine that. And this girl goes, do you remember me? And she keeps telling me who her dad is. And I keep going, I don't know. And then I realize it's been like 18, no, it hasn't been 18 years. It's been 10 or 12 years since I've seen the girl. She was like 8. Just look at me, you should remember. No, things have changed. And I was riding home and I go, I know who she is now. I wouldn't have turned back and go all the way to Kentucky Fried Chicken again. But I'd have been some freak if I'd have came all the way through the drive-thru going, I just wanted to let you know I do remember who you are. I had a girl at a church in South Haven, Mississippi. I called her Peanut. I got names for everybody. It's not just Hallie. She's allergic to peanuts, and they said it was mean for me to call her Peanut. But then if you said her name's Ashley, she said, no, I'm Peanut. I said, see, there you go. So I have little names for everybody. And I would get to church and I would say things to her and I'd say, oh, here comes that ugly little kid again. And my wife goes, you can't say that to a junior high girl. And I said, I'll make you a bet. I said, I'll say that to her for the next 3 weeks, and for the next 3 weeks I'll be the first person she looks for at church. Through me aggravating her, she knew that I liked her. And she just wanted to be acknowledged by me. Because it made her feel cared for. God created us to be in community so we could care for one another. God created us to be in community so that we could fellowship with one another. God created us to be in community so that we could encourage one another, even if it's just by our very presence. I aggravate Tracy all the time, but I bet you there's people here that are just happy to see Tracy. I can't figure out why. I smile when I see Linda Hoover because I got to pull her chain just a little bit. How many of you this morning were encouraged by somebody you've seen here this morning? Just by seeing them. Just by being in the same place with them. You think that's why God gave us the church? You think that's why behind the gospel that was the second thing that people in Acts 2:42 decided to do? They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. We talked last week about that being the gospel. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give anyone who had need. But on the fellowship point, look at verse 46. I don't know what translation you're in. I'm in the NIV right now, but look at verse 46. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. That's kind of like church, right? They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts. They had relationships. They spent time together. They cared for one another. Some of that was out of necessity because they came to Jerusalem for the Feast of Passover. We're still at the end of Passover. And they all gathered together. But when they heard what they heard, they were so excited they weren't even in a hurry to leave. You ever been in a church where at 12 o'clock it's over and at 12:05 everybody's out of the parking lot? This ain't going to sound nice, but I venture to say that's not a very healthy church. It's not a very happy church. I love it when I hear people walking around here going, where are we going to eat at today? Because that means some of our folks are going to go spend time together. There was a 2-week period where the fishes wanted to get me out of their yard. They needed to get a stick to chase me home. Part of it was because it was relaxing and it was fun. I was just around people that I liked. Then they had to go get jobs and stuff. Now I can't go down there all the time. Dumb jobs. Guys, I can tell you churches where I just got excited, as much excited going to church as I did to going to any social outing. Because I knew I was going to see the people that I cared for and that I loved. It's the highlight of my week. It said they continued to meet together in temple courts, broke bread in their homes, ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all people. And what happened? The Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. When people come in these doors, if they don't see the love of Jesus, if they don't see people that care about each other, they're going to go out of here, and it's not going to be maybe a place where they want to be. I love when I see people and I talk to them and I go, so I'm glad you keep coming. And they go, people here are just so friendly. They see the love of Jesus being shared between folks. They see encouragement being shared between folks. People, I could be the best preacher in the world, but if you guys was hateful, people wouldn't come back. We need to be dedicated to the preaching of the gospel first and foremost, but we need to be dedicated to how we treat one another and how we encourage one another. They spent time together, they supported one another, they liked each other and grew to love one another. There's going to be things that I do that annoy you at some point. But when you love somebody, sometimes you overlook those things. Why? For the better good of the body and better good of the relationship. You don't think after 30 years my wife could give you a list of annoying things? Lady here this morning told me, I knew your mother. My mother drove me nuts. There's nothing I wouldn't do to spend more time with her if I could. Because when we care about people, we get past the silly things. And we just get down to loving, because what we have in common is greater than anything that can divide us. Amen. If we're dedicated to the gospel, if we're dedicated to the idea that I believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, if we're dedicated to the idea that because I'm dedicated to Jesus, then I should be dedicated to the body, which means I got to look at my friends here, and regardless of whether or not there's things that annoy me or bother me or whatever, for the good of the relationship, what do I need to do? I need to love them anyway. And I need to encourage them anyway. Because a church full of fighting is not a church full of Jesus. Hebrews 10:23, 24 and 25 say this. Let us hold fast to the confession of our hope without wavering. What's that talking about? Let us hold fast to first Jesus, right? The thing that we talked about last week. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering. For he who promised is faithful. So we're saying we know God is faithful. We know that the promises that he made to us are good. And this is from the English Standard Version. I love the way this is phrased. I think in the King James it says provoke, which is a good word. It seems out of place here. It says, let us consider how to stir one another up. I've been accused of being a stirrer-upper. But I want to be a stirrer-upper in a good way now. It says, let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works. How can we encourage one another for love and good works? Check out verse 25. Not neglecting to meet together, as it is the habit of some. Another passage or another translation says, let us not forget the assembly. Does that sound familiar to some of you King James folks? Let us not forsake the assembly, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another all the more as you see the day approaching. Tony, was we talking about this right before Sunday school? The world out there is a mess. And I'm going to say something that sounds controversial, but please take it in the spirit it's meant. If we're not loving each other and we're not caring for each other and we're not telling people about the gospel, we might as well be saying, go to hell. Can everybody see where I'm coming from? I'm not saying that in a mean way. I'm not saying that to be cussing. I'm saying if we're not willing to love them in heaven, we're willing to watch them go to hell. Folks, you know what we need to get good at? We need to get good at loving each other. Because the biggest excuse some people have that aren't Christians is Christians. They see how we act. And then they go, why should I go there to get that when I can get that anywhere? The thing that people saw in the first century church when the church was first starting out, when it says that God added to their church daily those who are being saved. I see you looking over there, Bill. I got 4 minutes, buddy. I'm just teasing you, bud. They saw the love. They saw the acceptance. Without it, I wouldn't be a Christian. Because without it, I wouldn't have heard the gospel. Because in my youth group, when I was a kid, I didn't fit. It wasn't that they were bad kids. It wasn't that they were weird. They all went to different schools than me. All their families probably made more money than mine. And I was just on the outside. But after a while, you know what happened? God found a way to make me seen. And not in an arrogant way, in a loving way. And people started to accept me. And people started to invite me. And that's when I was able to let my guard down and hear the gospel for the first time. And you know what? There's people out there, they act like they're not interested, but they are. They act like they don't want to hear you, but they do. But you know what they want to make sure? First, they want to know that they're seen. They want to make sure they're not just some trophy or some prize. Hey, you got me to church, blah, blah, blah. We got to learn to love folks. And we got to learn to love ourselves. And we need to realize that the Bible says that even me, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. And I'm special. And then I got to learn to look at you guys and say, you know what, regardless of what they got going on, regardless of what they have that I like, or regardless of what they have that I don't like, Jesus likes it all. And He'll make the changes in them that need to be made. It's not my job to figure that out. Because if I'm too busy judging you, I'm not busy loving you. Guys, if your guard's up and you're worried about getting hurt, it's real, and I get it. But let your fellow brothers and sisters in the church really become people that fellowship with you. Really let your brothers and sisters in church get to be the people that know you. Now, I'm not saying go spread your business over the whole church. You might only find 1 or 2 people that you can share with, and that's fine. But find people you can lean on, that can encourage you and that you can encourage. God blessed my life. I don't like to say it out loud because he'll hear the sermon, but God blessed my life when He put Cody Shingle in it. Why is he with me all the time when I do music? Number 1, I think he's pretty good at it. But number 2, he's a blessing in my life. There's several of you here in this room, you're blessings in my life. And I hope that I can find a way to be a blessing in yours. And that we can be here for each other, and we can carry one another, and we can love one another. I'll embarrass Judy for a minute. She's been coming a short time, but I've gotten to know her. And I look forward to getting to know her more. And she's found some folks around here to talk to and to hang out with and spend time with. That's what it's all about. Several of you guys have done the same thing. That's what it's all about. And if there's anything we can do for you, find somebody in the church that you feel comfortable talking to and let them know. God didn't want us to do this alone. God didn't expect us to do this alone. Outside of His Son Jesus, the greatest gift He ever gave us was the church. So that we can walk together in love. Share that love with one another. Why? So that we can share it with those outside the church as well. Because I guarantee you look long enough, you're going to find somebody in this church that's been through some of the same things that you have. You're going to find people that are going to have to climb some of the same stairs that you're having to climb. They might not know exactly how you feel, but they know what's going on. There's joy found in community. Let's be stirrer-uppers. And let's find ways to stir one another, provoke one another, to encourage one another to good works, and to know what the gospel says. In Jesus' name, we can make it our prayer. Amen. The world's a rough place. And the world's the kind of place that can beat you up. Allow this to be the place where we could help put you back together. That means we can't gossip about one another. That means you can't say, you know what so-and-so said, or boy, that gets on my nerves. No, this is not the place, and we are not the people. Let's encourage one another. All the more as you see what? The day approaching. When the Bible says the day, it only means one. The day of Jesus. Because it's coming. Whether we acknowledge it or not. Guys, let's be encouragers of one another. Let's be lovers of friends. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you for this day, and I pray that through our time together we've learned something, or just been reminded of something, or just encouraged in something. Or Lord, if it's just been fellowship between two of these people in the pew that's been a blessing today, we'll take it and we'll claim it in Jesus' name. Thank you for my friends that have gathered here this morning. Thank you for the ones that aren't able to be here. And we pray that they feel our encouragement. In the name of Christ we pray. Amen. We have an invitation song, 307, it looks like. If you have anything on your mind or heart that you need to share, you can come right down here and somebody will pray with you, or you can just pray in your seat. But just let us know that if you need any encouragement, we're here for you. Let's turn to 307. Let's stand together. There's a call comes ringing o'er the restless waste and the light.